Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, if you're not satisfied with your love or sex life, I want you to know that I get how painful it is. Sometimes it's hard to know what to do to change things up and get the results you want. But having spent 20 years as a dating and relationship coach, supporting thousands of men to have the relationships and sex they want, I know it's possible for you when you get the right kind of support. As a woman coach, I bring a unique advantage by helping you understand how women think and feel and why they say and do things that can be so frustrating for you. My specialty is being able to tell within minutes why you're losing attraction, trust, or respect from women, and how to turn that around. Even though you've likely been raised to think you should be a man who doesn't need any help, it just doesn't work that way because none of us were handed a guide to love or sex. So every month by application, I open my calendar to a few men for consultations. Men are amazed to walk away from these sessions feeling more confident in and out of the bedroom. Coaching isn't for everyone. I work with men who are willing to be honest about their role in the situations they've created. So if you're still playing the blame game, this isn't for you. But if you're ready to take action and have a love and sex life you feel great about, book a time to meet with me. Go to shanajamescoaching.com/consult and fill out the form to tell me more about you so we can set something up. That's shanajamescoaching.com/consult. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and I'm excited to be here today to sort of bask in love for men. And I have an amazing guest, psychologist Erica Liebman, who's with us today. Welcome, Erica.
Hello.
And Erica and I met recently with a group called the Men and Boys Compassion Initiative, and she's one of the original members. And it really touched me, the work that you all have started, right? And what you're doing around really looking at how we can have more compassion for boys and men, and that it's one of the missing pieces in the world as we attempt to heal all of us. You and I have an aligned vision or perspective that we can't leave men out, right? We can't just throw them under the bus and just say, well, everyone else needs more attention because men got so much attention for so long. That actually, there's a danger in doing that, and that men need support too.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is interestingly a controversial conversation, which when I first came to this topic on my own, I didn't realize it was confrontation or
Oh,
so
interesting.
yeah, that it was so such a problem to talk about. I actually got myself into trouble in one of my courses.
Really? What
So
happened?
I well, I was in a diversity course getting my master's degree, and there was a question that the professor asked, I think with like good intentions, about whether we should talk about men in a diversity course. And I raised my hand and I said, absolutely yes. And it created quite the stir.
Wow.
I recall thinking I'm never going to talk to anyone in this class again. And in fact, it did create quite a stir. It became a topic of conversation the very next class. And so I thought to myself, Shayna, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe there is something really wild and radical about what I'm saying, that I'm not kind of falling in line with some of like the great liberal ways that we think about social justice and kind of like diversity. So I kind of just stepped back and I didn't talk about it. And then I went to get a doctorate and I just kept my mouth shut because I thought, I
Wow.
don't think I know what I'm talking about here. But based upon my experiences with treating men, especially in substance use facilities, I started to get more interested in the topic. And I realized that there was all this research that documents how men struggle. And I felt so like good, right? That I
Affirmed in a way,
finally,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
affirmed is the perfect word for it. And that is then what kind of began my journey and really wanting to specifically help this population.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think you'd agree, but you can tell me, if it's different, that for me, it's a yes. And it's not like I want to take resources away from other people who need them to support men. I want to have a world where there is abundance and there's enough. And what I see is if we let men struggle and suffer, we end up having extremely destructive behaviors in society. And so, I value men on their own and I want them to have support for themselves for that very reason alone. I also want the world to be safer and more peaceful and more collaborative. And it seems like, hurting men hurt other people.
Yeah, and I can certainly understand why it's controversial, right? Like I don't condone many of the negative things that have happened in history at the hands of like often men. But what I do know from being a psychologist is that my training has taught me to ask the question why, I mean, obsessively.
Yeah.
And when you dig a little bit deeper into some of these destructive behaviors, you do find that the way men are socialized is like a large part of the problem, right?
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
if you kind of shame and blame and point the finger, yes, that might feel good. You might discharge some of the anger, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I know you've told me a little bit about growing up and feeling more connected with boys and then working in the auto industry. And so maybe just give us a little background too of what that was like and what drew you to men or what has drawn you to men.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had an exciting previous career. I had the opportunity to go to a really great university and I went, but my heart was really set on learning to understand learning how cars like worked.
I
I
love
was
that.
always fascinated by cars and I grew up in a family where, my dad really wanted me to like work hard. So I worked on the land a lot. He would teach me how to repair the tractor, and my mom was into cars, my dad was into cars. And so
Cool.
I also felt like I was a jokester. I like to have fun with the guys, and it just kind of made sense that I would be pulled towards really wanting to leave college, which I did. And I returned later and learned how to work on cars. And so for about a decade, I worked in various places within the auto and then the racing industry. And so I was in
Mm.
machine shops, I was in car dealerships, then I worked on racetracks, managing a racetrack, and then I
Wow.
got my final break into working as an extra quote unquote man on the team in an American Le Mans series team. And so I was around guys
Wow.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was
So
that?
I had a blast.
Yeah.
I look back and I have some of the greatest experiences and stories of my life when
Oh,
I worked in that field. And I just really appreciated like the teamwork and the collaborativeness of men and the ability to problem solve, work towards a goal. For the most part, I felt comfortable. There were certainly moments like where there was like sexist behavior and
mhm.
some bad eggs. My experience in life is that there are bad eggs everywhere.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I had a really great experience. And so me walking back into kind of university life where there was this new way of thinking about men's place in the world was like really shocking to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you got to have that experience. I think when I think back to my 20s and where I started facilitating workshops, and I got to be a part of a workshop where men came to us as women and we gave them real, honest feedback with love and with care, and getting to like be with men in those vulnerable places changed my life. As I imagine,
Mhm.
right, getting to spend time with men in those ways, it's so different than having someone feel like an outsider or um, a lot of people in heterosexual relationships, women, like I just don't understand men, they don't make any sense to me or I don't even know why they do these things. And I think you and I have gotten to spend more time in the trenches in a way. And I think the more I get to know men, the more appreciation I have. But granted, like you said, there are some bad eggs, but I think that's um it happens everywhere. I know some women too who I would not want to spend time with and who are harmful.
I agree.
Yeah. So, what do you make of this controversy, or like, do you have a sense of how you would suggest or like things to move forward? If that makes sense. It's like, all right, this is controversial that we are supporting men, and especially in a way as women, are there any visions that you have or anything that you see that can help us work together?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think that we're in a time where we're looking at things from a more macro perspective. So we are identifying like different socio-demographic factors, right? Like race and gender, and economic status and all these things. And I think it's really good because are all we have a lot of various identity
Yeah.
factors, right? And so I think it's really good that that is a conversation that we're having right now. But I do think that it can become like such a black and white conversation. And
Mm,
so, my goal for the world would be for people to have conversations where there's an and, right? Like men have caused a lot of harm and let's not, kind of move past that and let's understand why it's happened. Let's
right,
understand that not all men are created equal, that there's, different experiences of being a man, right? Like being a black man is very different from being a gay white man, right? Like not just because you're a man doesn't mean you have the exact same experience as others.
right.
And I think that there's not enough appreciation for how the genders are really socialized so unconsciously, right? So I work with
Yes.
quite a few men where like the main difficulty in therapy is that expressing emotions is just like against a script and I can just see like the brow furrow when I start to ask a question and then some of my clients will just interrupt themselves and they'll just like quickly like change the topic or and it's always because they're about to express something that they don't think is very masculine.
Right.
And so that is just a really important thing to understand that we all operate on, kind of like beneath the level of awareness scripts that kind of determine some of our behavior, right? Like same with women. And,
Yeah.
when you have to conform to these scripts, man or woman, and you can't choose how you want to act because history, for a long time before you has generated these scripts, it can be really harmful to the individual and to other individuals.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really powerful, right? The more that we actually let go of the scripts and we let people be who they are and we don't put people in these categories and boxes. One of the things that I often work with my coaching clients, especially those who are single, is right, how to clear out those past resentments and pain and disappointment so that when the next person who you want to date, is in front of you, you can see this person as a unique individual, not just here's their gender or here's their race or here's their religion or and these people are this way, right? And so that feels so good to me too, to recognize, okay, we are unconsciously conditioned in so many ways. We have these scripts, we feel like we have to play these roles. And as we see them more clearly, I think then we can become more free of them. Um, and it's quite messy out there right now. The
Yeah, it
results.
really is. I think, like the best outcome we could hope for is for there to be a dialogue between the
Right.
genders, right? And for people to be able to express that they've been harmed and for people to hear it and then to express, well, this is why it happened and this is how I'm harmed as well, right? So,
Totally.
um, I do a little bit of couples therapy as well. And so I almost see, a cultural conversation like that of couples therapy, right? Where both people can hold and recognize the other's perspective.
Yeah.
Right now, there's kind of like you can't see my hands, but the fist at each other kind of conversations going on. But I do see a change. I'm seeing so many celebrities come out, so many news stories. Recently on Father's Day, they were talking about men's physical and mental health and helping men get the care that they need. That wouldn't have been on the news last year, right?
No
And so I
way.
think,
Or yeah,
yeah,
many of
so
those years.
I think the conversation is softening, and I have a lot of optimism and a lot of hope that there can be a real transformation.
Yeah. I've often wanted to do, like the truth and reconciliation that happened in South Africa. I've often thought that would be really beautiful with men and women.
Hmm.
Um, and I do know there are organizations actually out there. I've done a bunch of different workshops of really sitting in the shoes of, people, different genders, different races, sexual preferences, and things like that. So they do exist. And I think the more, the better. Yeah. Before we started recording, we were talking about the sad reality, right? That sometimes what comes out of a woman's mouth is, I hate men, or, I'm mad at men, or all men are this. And you had some really interesting things to say about that, like why you think that happens. So, can you share about that a little bit more too?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that there are some people who have a lot of bad experiences with men. And so I would never take away somebody's experiences and tell them like, well, like just shift your
Right.
perspective
There
and
is
try and,
trauma, there is wounding,
right.
there is, right. All of those things
Yeah.
are real.
Yeah, but I think like on a like a lower level, like not as harmful, like phrase that, when people say that like I hate men is that, well, that's the gender that you're dating, right? And relationships are so damn difficult. They
Right.
really are, right? I mean, when I work with couples, they don't know how to talk to each other at all, right? Like
Right. Right. Especially
what
those
I'm
in
trying,
heterosexual relationships. But you said you work with couples who are in all kinds of
yeah.
relationships too. Yeah.
Yeah, I work with yeah, a lot of like yeah, with a lot of gay couples as well. And so people just don't know how to talk to each other, right? So if you're predominantly dating men because you're a heterosexual woman or maybe you're a bisexual woman, right? Um, you might have a lot of frustration. Maybe it's less because of men, but more because that's the gender that you have to date, and
Oh,
relationships
interesting. Like
themselves are just
people have
difficult.
disappointed you, or people have not
Yeah,
lived up to your expectations, or where, but and those people happen to be men in that case.
right,
That's
right.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
sometimes yeah, sometimes I wonder that. And when I do couples therapy, it's not that, the female partner is coming in and is this emotional goddess, like, right, super emotionally intelligent and can rein herself in. Usually both parties, contribute to the dynamic that's going on. And, I do often see though, the divide around like home
Mm,
care, like doing the cleaning and the cooking that does often fall on women. So I really see that as being a real concern. But in terms of like a real difference in emotional ability, like sometimes I don't see as big of a difference as I expect to see, like given some of the
interesting.
stereotypes. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's important to note, right? Like sometimes these gender stereotypes don't hit you in the face. Sometimes they're subtle, and sometimes you don't see them nearly as much as, something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I tend to have, I don't know if it's a skewed view, maybe it is a more realistic view, like you're saying, where women say to me, like, I've never met a man who, is emotionally available or intelligent or whatever. And I'm like, wow, I work with so many of them,
Hmm.
and many of the men I work with are in relationships, and they often come to me in heterosexual relationships as a woman who can help them try to understand a woman. And oftentimes they come to me when a woman, isn't responsive or isn't collaborating or isn't loving. And granted, there are ways that sometimes they are not bringing connection, or they're not being, available in certain ways. So I'm not blaming either or, but it is interesting to have a different lens or a different view and see that there are women who are not emotionally intelligent or available, you know, a lot of them
Absolutely.
out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I do notice in my practice that women can be more emotionally fluent, but given the
Mm,
right like space where you feel safe, I mean, almost all of the men that I treat are like really able to open up and access their emotions. Some of them are
awesome.
not, right? Like some of them are not. And so I don't see that as much in my female clients, but given the right conditions, like men can open up, men can be complex emotional beings, right? And so
Yes.
that I think is what we're talking about in the Men and Boys Compassionate Initiative. Like if we change kind of like the landscape and the soup, right, that men are kind of sitting in and make the conditions a little bit different, like, what could happen to men and what
Right.
could happen to men, which actually makes them better partners to other men and women too, right?
I love that, right? It's like, what is the cultural change too that's necessary to support men to feel safe, to be vulnerable? I think that was part of my TEDx talk around men and women and the gender misunderstandings, and how curious your take on this. I mean, I think one of the reasons I see women have a hard time with men's vulnerability is because there's a sense of like, wait, he was my rock. He was the one I counted on. He was, I need him to be there for me. Or um, yeah, like some kind of dependence in a way,
Hmm.
which I think creates a little bit of that rigidity. Like then there's not the fluidity where a man can be like, okay, today I'm feeling emotional and tomorrow I'm going to be the rock. And, that to me, being human is a little more flexible than the roles that rigidify us.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And in your work with couples, um, what do you see happening like when one person gets vulnerable? What are some of the things that happen with the other person if they're not comfortable with it?
Yeah, well, one thing I see in heterosexual couples where the man becomes vulnerable, um, is that the female partner can like hold it for a second and then kind of like just jumps back on and gets critical. And I don't want to say that this is necessarily the way, all women are and that, men can't be critical
Yeah,
and
but
and
one
not tolerate
dynamic.
vulnerability of women. But I see it a lot, right? Where like the man kind of like lets down his guard and says, I don't know that I'll ever be good enough. I feel, you know, um, that I can't ever meet your expectations and it makes me feel like a failure. Really soft, spots that they're exposing. And it takes a lot of work, right, for them to kind
Yeah.
of really feel held by their partner. And it's understandable that it's not easy to hold your partner, right, when they've been doing something to irritate you over and over.
Yes.
Um, but I see men be vulnerable in couples therapy all the time, like all the
Mm.
time. Um,
And how do
but
you
it
help? Yeah.
yeah, I help by really like helping to paint a picture and being pretty validating of their experience because it does make sense. It does make sense why men would struggle to be vulnerable and not want to say some of the softer things that they're feeling. They're not
Uh-huh.
socialized to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when they do that and the woman starts jumping back with criticism or sort of some kind of attack, I imagine you pause that.
Hmm.
And then where do you go from there?
Yeah, I pause it and I often will, try and hear what the male partner thinks of that criticism and
Uh-huh.
like to even be vulnerable about that. Like what does that feel like to have your partner respond in that way to what you just said, right? And to help them
Yep.
feel like I'm there kind of backing them up and listening. But then I also really validate the other partner. Like, yeah, it makes sense that this is new for you, right? You haven't heard your partner be vulnerable with you, so it doesn't make sense, right? And
Oh,
um both perspectives can have some merit. But yeah, I really try and strengthen the people who are being vulnerable during the session.
I love it. I love imagining people working with you and one person, opening up and being vulnerable and you standing with that person and really supporting and then also, validating, okay, yeah, this is makes sense that this is hard for you on the other side. And what if we have compassion, going back to the Men and Boys Compassion Initiative? What if we have compassion for each other? How much changes um, when we actually have compassion instead of, like you said, holding up the fist toward each other or being on separate teams toward each other.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and right, like like a couples therapy type, engagement. My job is not to rationalize each partner's perspective to the other. My job is to help both communicate from vulnerability instead of anger and like kind of critical attacks and to, like you just said, to get people to understand where the other is coming from. Now, if we expand that to a macro level, right, in our culture and talking about the relationship between the genders and how we improve it,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be the same type of conversation, right, where
Yeah.
both parties are able to speak and listen and hold the other. And that takes a lot of skills, right? Like working through conflict takes a lot of skills. And I
Yeah.
don't know that the average person has that yet, right? I
No.
have hope that that will become more and more common.
Yeah. Yeah. I've often said when I'm working with people, it's like that's the mastery level where, okay, first I know what's happening for me and I can actually, know it and name it and sense it and feel it. Then I can actually speak it and express it in a way that is collaborative, right? Or moves something forward, creates more connection rather than less. And then also to be able to listen to the other person and hear the things that we feel triggered by or hurt by or misunderstood by without blowing up and attacking back. It takes a lot to be able to get there.
Yeah,
Do
and
you?
I think it starts with self-awareness first, right? I mean, I just know in my own journey and trying to do conflict better, for me to understand what my hot buttons are so I can
Yeah.
distinguish between what's this person versus what's me, and understanding that someone having a problem with me or being frustrated by me doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means that I've got to trying to understand their perspective a little
Yeah.
bit more, but that doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
Yes. Awesome.
Mhm.
Right. Nobody has to be wrong. We can all have some validity in where we are and what we're saying and what's arising for us and what we're noticing. And also we can have compassion for each other. So
Absolutely.
good. Is there anything else before we complete that you want to say or anything feels like we missed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing that I want to say, and because we have this conversation all the time, in NBCI, like how are we going to encourage compassion, from women to men? Because there's a lot of women who are rightfully really angry. And so I think the first thing is to listen, right? And understand like what the difficulties are, because you can't solve a problem unless you understand why people have a hard time with it. But also the thing that I've been really vocal about is like understanding, like through education. And so if we
Mm,
kind of rewind to the beginning of our talk, when I discovered that there was all this research about men stating that they had really bad mental health outcomes and really physical health, bad health outcomes in like specific areas, I mean, I was flabbergasted, but it also really helped me understand, not just from like an emotional perspective, like, hey, like you need to be compassionate towards men too, but like, hey, men commit suicide at 4 to 1 rate
or
of
yeah.
women,
Yeah.
right? Like men die from these particular diseases. Men, are more likely to be homeless. Men are, killing each other and are more likely to be locked up in prison. Like, hey, there's all these things that are happening. And I think that when you take a look at some of those facts, a lot of people would stop for a second and actually pause. And that's all we need.
Yep.
I think we just need
Yep.
people to pause and think, why is there such a problem? And
Yeah.
so to be educated on some of the facts, related to men's issues, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and for the work that you're doing. And where can people find you? Do you want people to find you and follow up with you?
Yeah, they can find me. They can find me. I expect some hate work. It's some hate mail in this field, right?
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
right?
Well, I
This is
hope not. I would be very
But
upset by that.
I hope not. I hope that this has been, a helpful conversation for some people. And of course, I'm always open to listen to like what people might say, like, hey, Erica, like, yeah, I heard you say that, but like this is my critique of
I
what
feel
you said, or
differently or
here's
I
my
think differently.
experience. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm open to that. But I'm a psychologist in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And you can just Google me. You'll find my website, right there, and anybody can contact me. I'm happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm so sorry that you have received hate for what you're saying. And yeah, that just, it breaks my heart. And it's just unnecessary, And I think that's part of it is that if we are supporting each other and supporting compassion, um, yeah, it doesn't move anything forward, right? The hate doesn't create more of what any of us want. So
Hmm.
thank you
Hmm.
for enduring that. And also, may you never have to receive that again.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for all of your amazing work with men too. It's inspiring to see what you do as well.
Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word alive, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.